right.
Yeah,
I feel a little rusty about leading this meeting. It's been since February 19th that we met. So let's go ahead and start this meeting. And let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
allegiance, yeah. Okay,
Here we go.
all right.
Pledge of Allegiance.
I
to the
pledge
flag
allegiance
To the flag
to
of
the
the United
flag
States
of
of
the
America.
United States of America,
United States of America,
the republic
and to the republic
Stands
which
which
stands
stands
under
one
God,
nation,
one nation, under God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
liberty, and justice for all.
all right. Lead. Yes.
All right, thank you, everybody. Okay, let's take a look at our agenda. First of all, I need a motion to approve the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda. Mel's on mute.
Close.
You gonna second that, Mel, to
You
approve the
asking me
agenda?
something?
Well, are you gonna second to
Yeah,
approve the
I
agenda?
move to,
I second. I second.
Thank you.
okay,
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
No.
aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. And then the approval of the February, hold on a second, my computer went to sleep. There we go. I need a motion for the approval of the February 19th committee meeting minutes. I think it would be a really good idea if we just kind of take a second, and I mean, I've read them, but I'd like to make sure that everybody kind of just refreshes where we ended the last meeting.
Where
It was
is
quite a meeting.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't have.
The
Textbook
minutes are in
adoption.
board docs.
Yep, so we had the
Yep.
textbook adoption. We had a conversation about that.
Calendar discussion,
We
strategic plan
recommended.
updates.
They're on the screen.
I don't know if you had
They're
it.
on the screen, Melvin.
Here they are.
Thank you, Robin.
Okay,
Thank you.
I see it. Thank you.
Let me know if you want me to keep strolling.
Yeah, go ahead.
Robin, the only question I have on these meeting minutes, I'm having a mental image that we had this at McCracken. Did we have this at the
We
disc?
did. Yes, we did. I need to change
was
the
at
location. It
McCracken.
was at McCracken.
Location.
Yes,
Okay,
Mhm.
yeah, thank you.
so I'll make the correction.
Okay. So then do I have a motion to accept the meeting minutes with the correction for the location?
I move.
So moved. Okay, Mel move, I'll second.
Okay. Any more discussion? All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Ready for the
Aye.
vote. All right.
Okay. All right, thank you. So that's unanimous. All right. Robin, do we have any public comment?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so we're going to move on through that. And the purpose, one of the main purposes of today's, oops.
You there?
You know, yeah, you know what, I guess I clicked my, my little mouse pad here and it looks like, I can't see anybody right now, but you guys can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes, we can see you.
Oh, really? I can't see anybody.
Yeah,
Let's see.
that
Let's see.
happened to somebody in our meeting the other day.
Here we go. I'm back. Okay.
Happened to me
So,
first night.
Okay,
yeah, one of the main reasons that that we have to talk about today is that at our last full board meeting, the board decided that all the committees would revisit their scope of work. And so we need to have a conversation about the board approved scope for this academic committee. And Robin has that on the screen right now. So if you all will remember, our first meeting was February 20th, 2019. And this is when we developed the scope. And
Yeah.
so I would appreciate some conversation from you all as to whether or not you think that this scope is still appropriate for the academic committee. Robin, can you scroll down to the actual work?
Yeah, we saw it today somewhere.
Yeah. If you scroll down, you'll see, there we go, a little bit more. Okay. So this is what we determined was the scope of the academic committee. We said it was curriculum and instruction, Kate, the ad hoc K-8 committee, alternative ed, special ed and 504s, PEs and ARs, and other areas as recommended by the board. So here we are, 18 months later, or not quite, maybe 15 months later, and we need to determine whether or not this is still the pathway that we want to take. So are there any thoughts on this?
Mrs.
I
Fridrich,
have a thought.
Well, I think,
Yes, yes,
Oh.
Dr. Stratos?
you don't have language learners on your scope.
Okay. So that might be if we decide
I didn't hear.
to add to that.
I didn't
we-
hear her.
Okay, Mary, would you repeat that?
Mr. Camp, I was just bringing forward that nowhere on our scope that we address language learners.
Okay. All right. So we need to add that somewhere.
Should that be a determinant? Yes, sir.
Yes. What about I'm looking at things
So-
to eliminate, like the
Yes.
ad hoc K-8 committee.
That has, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm viewing this kind of from a different lens, to use Mary's word. I'm thinking that our, main focus is on the performance expectations and setting those performance expectations for Dr. Rodriguez. So I'm thinking that the other things that we've mentioned, including the language learners, that if we viewed those through performance expectations to make sure that we had OEs that addressed language learners, that addressed special ed and 504s, that addressed alternative education, that addressed Kate, and of course, we have a lot of OEs that addressed curriculum instruction. But I'm just wondering if the work should be focused around the OEs and making sure that, that we have an OE that matches with these. That's just my thought. Because the OEs are how we hold the superintendent accountable and how he reports to the board. So
you're saying one or the other, or all should be subtopics of PE and admin regs. Or we do without PE and admin regs, since they are also part of what we'll be looking at in terms of curriculum, career and tech. You know, I see the duplicate in both, but which way are you suggesting, Kathy?
Well, my suggestion is that that this committee work on creating OEs or PEs to ensure that they're inclusive of everything on this list. Because I think all the things that are on this list should be reported to the full board on a regular basis and not just to the committee. So I see it kind of as the committee's job to make sure that these things are included. And if, you know, if there was a specific task that needed to be done, something really specific, an ad hoc committee could be assigned. I don't know. Those are just my thoughts.
Kathy, my
Sure.
thoughts were along the same line. So Mel, what I was thinking too
Okay.
was that, you know, with a coherent governance, the PEs, or what will eventually be called OEs, are really the oversight, the finding out what is going on. And so I was thinking that those PEs or OEs would consist of all these things that we have in our scope currently. And so that maybe our charge, maybe our scope really is just to look at the PEs. When I first started on the board 15 months ago, I was really excited about committees. And in the meantime, I have come to the realization that unless I go to all the other committee meetings, I'm not really understanding or finding about some of the intricacies and the nuances of what's going on. Information might better come to the full board. So I'm leaning toward the scope of the academic committee being the PEs. Mary, what do you think of this?
I think if we use the PEs or the OEs in order to drive the results of these categories, it makes a lot of sense.
Uh-huh.
It really does, because these are the areas that we should be looking at and be refined as to what are we looking, including, you know, early childhood education to, you know, to graduation, and maybe even eventually looking at adult ed. But these should be the categories that fall within the prospective OEs.
Mel, what do you think?
Well, I've got, you know, a couple questions. If we go in that direction, how do we extend or review what's being done by the admin until we get to the point where we are looking at what they've done?
You know, that's
You know,
excellent.
We only see the.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I thought you were finished.
I'm sure if you understand what I'm saying, I thought I'd explain it furtherly. But
Go ahead.
yeah, I'm just saying that, you know, I think we, in some sense, ought to be somewhat active so that we can help to drive the board's agenda in terms of directions. And I mean, more like research type stuff or new ideas type things, instead of waiting for the PEs, which happens most of the time once a year. You know, we can help to create some of the things that's happening towards that PE.
Right, I hear what you're saying, and some of my thoughts on that is, if you go back, if we were to go back and think about, I think it was PE 1.2. That was the professional learning. When that was presented to us, we did not accept it the first go round because we had a lot of questions and we had some thoughts. And if I remember correctly, I believe we even said that we might want to look at 1.2 more than annually. And so, so Mr. Campbell, as usual, you are spot on that the whole way that PEs should be looked at might have to change. It might have to be that PEs are presented more than just once. It also could be that when we look at the list of PEs, and I asked Robin to put that in board docs, and she did. So we have all of PE 1 and we have all of PE 6 in board docs because those are our 2 charges. And way back in the beginning of the academic committee, we talked about how is it that all of the PEs are not on the work plan? How come some of these PEs, like 1.7, 1.8, they're not even on the work plan? So that would be what I think you're saying is that having more ability to drive some things. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yes, and you know, I'm saying, and not necessarily because we want to review what the administration is doing. I mean, I don't care if I'm saying that we as a board need to have an idea of what they're doing while they're doing it, so that to suggest or encourage certain directives towards it as it happens. I mean, things happen during the course of a school year that might encourage a change in those PEs that's already been stabilized, or at least are different in terms of the administration's viewpoint, but we can add things or look at things and kind of redirect to a degree. That's what I'm thinking.
Dr. Stratus?
Is it possible, if we're looking at PEs, and Mr. Campbell's correct, we normally do the presentation as a result of, not in the start of, a point of progression and then the result of? Can we look at maybe having reporting of information of the PEs on a calendar that lends us to share where we're going, maybe as the onset of the school year, at some point having a benchmark, and then having that reporting cycle of when we're closing everything out? I know it may be a little more cumbersome that way. My team may not care for it in that manner, but and I don't mean it in a bad way, I mean it in a good way, that if we look at the idea, and I'm going to pull up the chart, and I do apologize, annual student achievement, that we at least do something at the beginning of the school year as to what are we driving for student achievement, so it helps drive the bus. Am I?
Right, and Dr. Stratus, that's
Because
what
I
I
wasn't
meant when I said that we could certainly take a look at the work plan and
Okay,
say that,
gotcha.
okay, we're going to review this 4 times a year. And
Okay.
so that it, not saying we're approving it and taking it to the full board 4 times a year, but that let's take a look at it and see where we are, and maybe talk about we need to go down this road with it before it is brought to the full board for approval. I mean, that's kind of how I'm seeing it. Is that what you're saying, Mary?
Mrs. Richards, yes, basically we're saying the same thing. To
Okay.
be markers and benchmarks along the way. Right now we're responsible for 11 published PEs, because I've not seen the documentation for the 1.7 or 1.8. So yes, and I think some of these may have the opportunity of being truncated or a little more clarity as well on 2 of them.
Kathy, were you going to say something?
Well, yes, I was just going to say that I think for the purpose of setting our new scope, I think that the scope is related around making sure that we have PEs that address our areas of concern, that address our academic and student discipline or whatever, but that address our instructional areas, and to define a work plan that, you know, how they will be assessed. And I think that I can see this committee, the academic committee, going through each of the OEs as they currently exist and saying, is this will be a time to examine them and say, is this really, does it say what we want it to say? Are these, and what things need to be added? Like, do we need to add something specific about language learners? Do we need to add something specific about these other topics? Kate, for example, and then map out, you know, how we're going to, you know, that we start with these 6, and then we go to the middle, and then 2 months later we start, it's kind of a rotating thing. So there's a beginning, middle, end. Does that, you know what I'm saying? A beginning, middle, end for all of them. So it's kind of like a continual loop where they're being looked at. I think the key is that they all be presented to the full board when the, you know, so when it's time at completion, or be presented to the full board if there's like something that's come up that we're like, oh, you know, this might need to be targeted or changed.
Right. I could see the annual work plan, you know, just being a little more, I could see the academic committee work plan being fluid with end dates
Yes.
as dictated by the board work plan. Is
Yes.
that kind of what you're saying,
That's
Kathy?
exactly,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So then would you say that we are we in agreement that next week, the academic committee is going to bring forth the scope of the committee to be PEs?
John,
John, you want to say something?
Yes, if I may.
Sure.
I think I cannot overemphasize how spot on Mel is with his concern. Despite the rhetoric out of the Aspen group and what have you around coherent governance, we're still chartered by law to provide oversight to the administration of the school district. And I can't, the hurdle I'm trying to jump over is to try to understand how, in the name of heaven, a semi-annual or an annual examination of a PE is going to be able to justify providing oversight, particularly as Mel points out, that we need to know what's happening when it's happening, or else you can't be proactive at all. You're just reactive to issues, and it may be way too late to address the issue by the time it finally rolls around to a review. I think the academic committee has the least risk, frankly, of any of the committees of this happening to them. However, I think it's very, very important that the administration understand that there's going to be continuous oversight of their actions by the board. So I hope that you'll take Mel's concerns into strong consideration when you devise how often you're going to get updates on how progress is going to be on these PEs. That's all.
John, well said. I do believe that Mel's concern is just an echo of my concern. or actually I should say, I'm echoing his concern in that the way that I see it is that there's going to be actually even more oversight, but it's
More
going to
oversight.
it's going to be in a more structured way. It's going to be in a like right now, you know, we look at curriculum and instruction. All right. Well, we spent 2 or 3, 4 weeks on birth to 5 years old, and you know, it was a great deal of information, but it did not lead us to a performance expectation and a result. And so that's what I'm seeing more is that the PEs should lead us toward an analysis of a result, and that the work plan as stated now is so not comprehensive. For instance, John, when I'm looking at the work plan right now and I see there is no 1.7, I'm going to go to 1.7 in our PEs, and it says gather, analyze, and use data and research in making curricular and instructional choices.
Yeah, but
That's not included in the work plan as such. Mary?
yeah, well, there's 2 things. One, that's actually an action, not a result, right?
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
so I find that's just one. But we also have to be careful if we're putting all our energy at reporting process. When are we actually doing the work? And I mean that with the greatest respect, in all truth, because we have the hopes to work at a level of greatness, but if all we're doing is guarding the house and reporting who's coming in and out, we must be conscious that we need time as well to work. And I mean that, again, with the greatest respect to each of you. But I just think it's fair to share that perspective to the board, you know, to our board. You know, it's a lot of weight if all the time we're doing is reporting. Then when are my people and myself, when are we actually working and building capacity for our district and monitoring? And I think that's critical for us to take into consideration. I'm sorry. I just...
Mel?
No, that's well said. Mel?
Yeah, I agree with Mary in terms of that, and I'm not suggesting a lot more work from the administration of it. I'm suggesting a lot more work in terms of how we are driving the bus, and we will need updates to make sure that we're driving the bus in the right direction, or we are both on the same road. And you know, I'm not suggesting that we change things dramatically, except through policy, but we have to know how that's going to be driven. You know, we can't possibly change policy after we, you know, I'm just saying from a time sensitive thing, we ought to be conscious of where we're going so that we can be thinking the changing of policies way ahead of getting a results.
I understand. Yes, sir.
John?
I think a perspective has to be kept in that we are not the board of a private corporation or organization. We're a public board. And a periodic examination of the PEs is going to be almost by definition looking at it from 30, 40, 50,000 feet. Our customers, the parents, students, teachers, the ones that we're accountable to, look at it from 500, 600, 700 feet. So there's going to be a dichotomy in expectations there. We have to know what's going on. And it's not a binary thing. It's not either just a little work or too much work. It's the answer somewhere in the middle. But as onerous as it does seem, that it seems like we're trying to get into the weeds. I don't think anybody is.
Right.
But the fact remains, we cannot provide oversight from a level of 50,000 feet and address the type of issues that the parents seem to want us to be interested in. And they're the citizens, they're the voters. I don't mean that in an election perspective, but they're the citizens, the voters, the owners of the school district. And we have to be responsive to not only what do we think is the best way to govern underlined, but what are the expectations of the public about how we're going to govern?
Okay, so maybe I'm not understanding, but I'm not understand if I heard you correctly. I'm not understanding how moving toward an examination of the PEs and an examination of the work plan and a resultant change, how that is a too high of a level of observation and involvement than the current work plan where not even all the PEs are even looked at. So
Okay.
I don't know if I'm missing something.
Well, a case in point, the grading system for
Mhm.
while school is out, okay? How is the board going to be responsive to public inquiries and questions about and opinions about that if it divorces themselves from the issue until 4 months later when it reviews what was done? Okay.
That's what,
The emphasis, the work plan is nothing more than a guide as to what time of the year you're going to look at
Mhm.
something. Okay. Well, things don't happen that we can't control along that schedule. So we have to be reflexive. We have to be nimble enough to be able to deal with things as they come up and not say, yeah, that's horrible that so many people are upset about this. We'll examine this 3 months from now when we have our PE review. That won't cut it, friends. I'm
Well,
sorry.
no one's suggesting
John.
that, John.
Oh, I think I
That's-
understand. I
Yeah.
think I understand now.
yeah, yeah.
We're strictly
example.
talking, I think that what I'm hearing you say is not at all what I'm thinking as far as the
Okay.
full board is concerned. The full board will continue to address issues and ask questions and be responsive. I'm looking at, this is the academic committee that has their structure and their plan so that senior staff knows, what is going to be looked at. It's a dynamic plan, but nowhere do I see where there's not the possibility that the full board would address an issue such as that you just brought up. I mean, that to me is certainly full board kind of instant reactivity.
Well, I don't want to get into a side discussion, and I want to let you have your meeting, but the history of our agenda setting does not support that.
Are you still there, John?
The history of our agenda setting does not support your assertion. So, but I'll leave it at that. I just wanted to make my input.
Well, I would have to disagree with that comment, John, but we'll move
Yeah, but we're
forward.
not here to discuss that.
Well,
Yeah, so we're here to discuss what exactly the scope of the academic committee should be. And so, I think I put forward my thoughts on that. If we were to examine the PEs, examine the work plan, and determine that the PEs were going to be our scope, I see where that it's actually more efficient, and we will be able to look at things more frequently. Dr. Stratos will know that we're going to be looking at things and I mean, it just seems to be more streamlined. Kathy and Mel, what do you think?
I agree with,
I agree.
with that. I agree with that.
Yep.
I know the process is just where we were, adding a little differences, but I agree with that being the scope. Just continue to look at the PEs that's relevant to the academic area in terms of the board.
And, it also gives us the flexibility to, if we see PEs that are not there, that are needed, if you ask what's not there, what's missing, and we can look at those. But I think a study of our current PEs would be and flow into a work plan, and is exactly what we need to do.
So would it be advantageous for us right now to look at the PE1, which is instruction, and PE6, which I believe is discipline, student discipline? Would it be advantageous for us right now to look at those, and that when we go back to the board, we're going to suggest that these are the PEs that would be within our scope, regardless of whether they're on the work plan or not?
So clarifying, you're talking specific PEs.
Yes, I'm trying to get us to come to some kind of consensus. I mean, not immediately right now, but what are we going back to the full board and saying that our scope is? And I am suggesting that when you have section 1, what's on our screen right now, performance expectations for instructional program, I am suggesting that we should have a PE for every single one of those areas.
Wow.
Currently, we do not, according to our work plan. We do not have it for 1.7 or 1.8. And then, Robin, could you switch to PE6, please?
Problem.
Okay, and so in PE6, we are tasked according to the work plan with 6.1 and 6.7. And Mary brought up a very good point. Some of these PEs are strictly just actions.
Right.
Distribute a behavior policy. I mean, that's not, I mean, a performance expectation should be more inclusive than just distributing a policy.
Yes.
Yes.
Um,
Well, that's why I think, I don't know if you were suggesting we start on that activity today, but I think that's a good activity for our committee to do, is to look at each of the PEs and make sure that they're stating something that's measurable, that is worth measuring.
Yes, and I think that would be a very good place to start. And so we can either start that right now, or we could say, let's get at our next meeting, we'll come back with everybody having reviewed the PEs. Yes, Dr. Stratos?
To speak a little bit to where Mr. Campbell was driving the bus, as we go through this, if we really look at scattering out the reporting, you will have different benchmarks with the overarching goal of this PE.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
For example, when we are having student achievement one, I mean, you certainly, what's the fall map scores? What do the winter map scores look like? And then student achievement at the end of the year. It wouldn't just be a student achievement, 1.1 is done, and we'll present it to the board for their approval. I mean, it's got to be more dynamic and flexible and alive.
Yes.
So perhaps our charge should be that I think right now it would behoove us to go through PE1 and
Sure.
and take a look at 1.7 and 1.8 and say, is that something we are going to say to the full board that we would like to include in our scope because currently it's not on the work plan?
Well, yeah, but just because it's not on the work plan doesn't mean it's not in our scope.
True, true. So, so then Kathy, would you suggest that just by saying PE1 is our scope?
Well, PE1 and PE6 seem to be assigned to us, right?
Well, not all of 6, and that's what
Not
we
all
have
of
to
6.
look at.
Okay.
We need to, at the annual work plan, Robin, sorry to make you go back and forth so often, but is there any other committee that looks at PE6?
HR has some of PE6 only because of the nature of, some of it is under operations.
So
And, I'm sorry, go ahead.
it's a
Whomever.
split PE.
Correct.
And see, some of that doesn't make sense to me that it's under HR. If you would, please take a look at 6.4. Implement
I don't have
intervention
it.
strategies.
Yeah,
to-
that shouldn't be under HR. That's why I was suggesting that the academic committee take both of these, PE1 and PE6, and visit them line by line and make us, make a determination which one stay with us or how reword them if they're just a process versus, something that's measurable.
Robin?
The reason why it's split is because it all was under student service. And when that department was dissolved, Kiki, who is the director of student service, is now in HR. So therefore, some of the items that followed her to HR. But all of that, when this PE was done, was under student services. But we don't have a student service department any longer. So that's why that PE is split between HR and academics.
Hmm.
Here's a question. Because she's under HR, does that, take away the possibility that this can still be the purview of the academic committee?
No, that's you all's purview to do what you want with it.
Right. I
Right.
mean, we don't
Yeah.
just have to address instructional services when we're talking academics.
Right. No, I just give you
She's just
why
giving
it
me,
was divided.
Oh,
What
I
you do
understand
with
what
it
you're
is your
saying.
decision. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
talking to the committee now.
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Right. No, I agree. I agree, Mel. That's why I asked Robin to include this in board docs is because, there's a lot in here that on PE1 and PE6 that I do think some reporting out for oversight and thoughts and everything would be very appropriate for the academic committee.
Okay, and in the other side of it, it can be the purview of more than one committee. Since eventually, I mean, we both can look at it from our angles, and then we report to the full board our findings. And
True.
in my mind, that gives us a little bit more comprehensive look at any item from an academic standpoint. That's the total board is academics. It's all about academics.
Right. And Mel, if I'm reading this correctly, I'm looking at the work plan. There are no PE6s. There's PE6 is not looked at by anyone
By the board, yeah.
but the academic committee for those two areas. So
Yeah. Why
And
the
there's a
others
whole-
exist? Yeah,
And there's a whole lot in PE6 that, in my opinion, absolutely needs to. For instance, programs that promote health, mental health, wellness, and nutrition. I mean, that is critical nowadays. And there's no PE assigned to anyone to find out what's going on with that. Robin?
Right. So it says 6.1 annual student service report that was usually reported out at the fall work session. And what they did is report everything in the PE, where it went from discipline, it went through mental, it was a full report like what you got with an HR report. So it encompassed the whole entire PE. It just wasn't 6.1 or 6.2. The annual report took, once a year, it took the whole PE.
So,
So you had about nursing, you had discipline, you had the whole thing.
we
So
gotta
PE
be,
si-
go ahead.
So PE6 was then presented to the whole board in its entirety.
Correct, as an annual report, and it usually came in the fall at the work session.
I must ask, did it this past year?
Mhm.
Not this, no, it didn't, not this past fall, it did not.
I'm so glad you said that because I had no recall that we had seen a comprehensive assessment of PE6. So I mean, I'm glad to know that. I'm sorry to know that, but I'm glad to know that.
Right. Well, going forward, you know, is it going to continue to be addressed the way it had been addressed? I mean, and let's face it, the way it had been addressed was before there were committees.
Before this committee, yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, the board didn't have any standing committees when it's presented the way you suggested, right, Robin?
We did in the past, sir, yes, because
And you presented it that way
yes,
then also?
yes, sir, yes, sir.
Okay.
They reported out some aspects when we had a student service committee.
Okay. Yeah, that's another reason why we need to do what we're suggesting, Tricia, to review it and decide, you know, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Dr. Stratos, you wanted to say something?
yeah, I'm just trying to get some institutional history.
Yeah.
So was student services under ISD in the past, or did they have their own director or chief?
They had their own chief.
Okay,
It
Now I
was
understand.
a separate department.
okay. So as that position dwindled, it left itself with a director, am I correct, for student services, and that would be Ms. Swinton?
Yes, when that department went away, it was divided out. Ms. Swinton's position went to HR, and some of the student services things it was divided between HR and instructional service.
I'm just thinking logistically when looking
Yes.
at the criteria that was in the work session document.
Yes.
We're being a two-headed serpent in the sense of, do we want to, at some point as a committee, have a conversation where would most of these items best also be serviced? Because this is almost like outside of my domain or inside my domain, and I just want to bring that to your attention as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Right.
Yeah.
That
And it makes,
that make all the academic sense in the world to us who are concentrating on academics, but you know, that would be something that I guess can be suggested in terms of a restructuring.
and that may just be a suggestion that you have with superintendent with regard to
When he presented,
implementation.
yeah, I think that this is a little off topic, but I think he did present that.
In the efficiency
in-
report.
In the
Yes,
efficiency
yes,
report,
yes.
Yeah, he did.
yeah.
So where are we now?
So, right, so where are we? Because we need to determine our work forward until such time that we have any new understanding based on coherent governance implementation with the new policies or the the OEs. I mean, we just need to work with what we have right now. And so if I'd like to ask, am I hearing the committee say, and with your input, Dr. Stratos, that next Tuesday, when we report out to the full board, that we are recommending that our scope at this time is PE1 and PE6 with further investigation as to the appropriateness of each of those PEs being within Dr. Stratos's area. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I could support that recommendation and the understanding that the
Kathy,
academic
Mel?
committee,
Well, yeah, I was, going to suggest what you said initially, Trish, about examining our PEs. I guess we could specify PE1 and PE6 to examine our PEs and the work plan flow, something about the work plan.
Dr. Stratos, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no.
Technology is frustrating sometimes. So could you finish what you were saying, please?
No, I'm good, Mrs. Fridges, thank you. I'm in
Are you
support.
sure?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
Kathy, back to you then. Would you repeat that?
Well, you said that the scope would be to examine our PEs, PE1 and PE6, and determine, if you wanted to include what you just said, determine their appropriateness under the ISD department, or under the, and development of a work plan, of a fluid work plan or work plan.
Okay, Mel?
the only question I have is, are you going to add the addendum that the our scope will also be any additional thing as seen by the board, directives from the board?
What's your opinion on that?
I think it should be yes. I mean, the board might request that we look at K through 8 again. I think that's a part of what we would be doing in support of the curriculum department. And, particularly if they even bring a suggestion that we go in that direction, then the academic committee would want to be, looking at that to support whatever evidences they brought back.
Kathy, what's your
And
opinion
that's
on
just
that?
one example.
Well, I have a little bit different thought on that. I think that, certainly for doing the board work and not the district work. So, could we go out and explore K-8? Well, what exactly does that mean? I mean, we looked at that scope initially when we took it on, and we had a couple of meetings, remember? And I don't know, Mel,
I understand. I understand. I agree with you to that point. But I still think we would need to look at it from a cost factor, and whatever the board decision would have to be made upon, other than what the administrators brought to you.
I agree with Mel that what we bring back on Tuesday to the full board should include, and any other items that the full Board of Education deems appropriate for the academic committee to look at. But I think when that moment comes, to your point, Kathy, the three of us would need to ask a lot of questions.
Yes,
So
that's,
if the board is saying, if the full board says, oh, we think the academic committee should look at K-8, then I would say, and
What do
what
you
does
want?
that look like?
What do you want us
does
to
that
find
look
out?
like?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
So
yeah.
yeah, Dr. Stratos?
If I could add, because Kathy, I mean, Mrs. Friedrich and Mr. Campbell, I'm in support, and as well, Mrs. Robine, because it lends to give that opportunity of other perspective at operations. And I think that's important as well. And then the committee members, as the board trustees, your role will be, let's be more definitive then as we go forward at looking at this. So it's not just a large blanket, but I'm supporting that clause in addition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody keeping time?
Okay, so,
Yeah, 45 more minutes.
yeah,
It's to examine the PEs and work plan and other areas as recommended by the board.
Yes.
Yeah.
okay, so I think that sounds like a good plan. Would you like to make that a motion, Kathy? To bring that to the full board as the revised scope of the academic committee?
Sure.
Or Mel, do you want to?
I'll second it. I can't remember all the terms there.
I think
Okay.
the important parts is to examine PE. Okay, I'm saying this, but I'm having a second thought right here. Should we look at all the PEs and see which of those would be better for for the academic, or just 1 and 6? The reason I say that is I'm looking in my policy book here.
Yeah, I don't have much. So.
Okay, and I'm seeing something along the lines of, all right, community relations.
That's exactly what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I am.
how much of this really ties in with, I mean, when you think about finance, you think about operations, how much, Mary, as you're glancing at that, how much of this might be something that actually falls under how teachers report to parents or principals communicate with parents? Is this something that maybe we should also look at?
The other part of that as well, Mrs. Friedrich, is the adage of our communications department in there as well, because there could be reports coming from that way on our robocalls, the amount of feedback and relationship on social media that we monitor. But I agree with you, 8.0 is something 2 ways.
So I think really, so we just say that the original one was to examine the PEs. Don't put,
Right.
don't specify the PEs. Examine
Mhm.
the PEs, the current PEs. So I move that the academic committee examine the current PEs and develop the scope really, what are we going to do next? This is just, right? What's our next job? And our next job is to examine the PEs and develop a work plan with the PEs that we feel are within the ISD, or within what? That fall within the academic committee?
That would be cleaner.
Yeah, academic committee, that's our purview, not ISD, yeah.
That support student instruction and are within.
Not signed.
And other topics as suggested by the board.
Yeah.
So what is that really saying now? Explain that to those of us who don't really understand what's being said beyond PE1 and PE6.
I think it means that this is my interpretation of what we just said, that we're going to sit down as a committee and look at the PEs. And if we see something in a PE that supports the instruction of our students, that we think should fall under the academic committee, then we will pull that out and add it to our PEs. And then work that into a work plan. And then in addition to that, if the board assigns us any other particular task.
Right. So
Yeah.
the way I'm
Donna?
hearing this, it seems to me that we really cannot go back to the board with our scope on Tuesday, because
Right,
in
that's-
just this
What I'm
conversation
hearing-
alone. Yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead, Mel.
What I'm hearing is we're still looking for the scope within
Yeah.
the PEs. I mean, we got 1 and 6, but we don't know what else is within our scope.
Well,
Exactly.
And we can't go there and say we're going to examine all the PEs, because all the PEs probably not within our scope. But when we say that, that puts it within our scope. If we say our scope is to examine all the PEs, that's
yeah.
the
right.
board's scope.
Right, exactly. So really, I suggest that we do not go back with the scope, even though that was our charge, because in examining the PEs, we realized, as we did before, that there are several scattered throughout the entire 12 or 11 PE
Categories, yeah.
categories.
We understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that we would, that our next action item is to review those and then bring back to the board at the next meeting what our recommended
Yeah.
scope is.
We need more
Exactly.
time.
So we need to do this work to define, to more, define our
Yeah.
scope. Yeah.
Right.
But we are in agreement that our scope is going to be performance expectations.
Yes.
Okay.
And work plan.
Right.
Right.
That relates, as it relates to the academic committee.
Yes. Yep.
Right. Okay. Mary?
Mary.
May you consider using 2 guidelines of academic and social emotional learning of children?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Sounds good.
Excellent. Yep.
Because if not, we could get way too much into all of these, relating them to instruction.
Yes.
Oh, and Mary, that's where next time we meet, you're going to have to really just say, okay, think about it this way, and say
Yeah.
that,
Okay.
this, yeah, I mean, you've got to be, you're the chief instructional service officer. We need you to say what you're thinking. So,
Yes, ma'am.
okay.
All right.
All right. Well, guys, I think this was very productive. Maybe a conversation we should have had in the beginning, but we've all learned so much over the past year.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, discovering that all of our PEs weren't even in the work plan was a big discovery.
Exactly. So, all right. So then really we have no motions coming out of this academic committee meeting, no action. However, we have we have the charge that for our next meeting, we're all going to have reviewed the PEs and that are in our folder here and come with suggestions as to which would be appropriate for the academic committee to take under its wing.
Correct. And we're using what Mary suggested as the gatekeeper into that academic
Exactly.
and student emotional learning.
Right.
All right. Let me, Robin wanted to say something, but let me throw a ringer in the whole deal. How does the PE as written now relates to the OEs that will be adopted as the new PE?
Right. Mel, the way I look at that is that we've got to continue forward with our work. And this is the way in which, we are operating now. And until the time that the OEs and the policies are adopted by the full board, we'll have to cross that bridge when we come to it, is the way I see it. What about you?
I don't know. I'm just saying, I just want to know where we are and why, what direction we're planning on. Yes, I could agree with that. I mean, all we do when when the new plan is adopted, that we make the adjustments to our scope accordingly, or
Right.
however it relates. Hopefully it's just a mirror of what we
Yeah.
have. Yeah.
I
And
feel
Mel-
that the PEs, you're just changing the name to operational
I'm hoping
expectation.
that, Kathy. That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah,
I'm not-
I
I'm
think
not
that's the segue. It just
Okay.
goes from being called a professional expectation to
Yeah.
an operational
Operational.
expectation.
Yeah,
That's all.
yeah. But I know that we vetted a lot of those though. And
Yes.
decided whether, so that's, and that vetting hasn't been done with these that we have. So somewhere along the line, you're gonna run into some that's not there or have been adjusted. But anyway,
Yeah,
Robin
so,
wanted to say something.
okay. Oh, sorry, Robin, but I can only see like 6 people at a time. So go ahead.
That's all right. I was going to say that I'll email you all of the PEs, the current updated ones that we have, because I think safety and security is not in your notebook. Oh, I'm not sure. I can't remember.
Let's see.
So I can, is safety and security in there?
Yeah, PE 11.
Okay. And then the FOIA?
No, I don't.
FOIA should be PE 12 then.
Well,
Yeah, we don't have that one.
Okay. So I will send that one out to you.
Okay. All right, that sounds good.
You got John.
Yes, John?
Just as a historical footnote on something you touched on earlier, a couple of years ago, there actually was a community relations outreach committee. It was chaired by Earl Campbell. So I think you have it's appropriate for you folks to include that in your portfolio.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, this historical perspective is so important to have.
That's good to know, John. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, is it pretty clear then what we've done and where we're going?
Yeah, but you can still send us a review.
Okay, I will write up a little blurb on what I will present to the board on Tuesday as what we accomplished,
Yes,
what we hope to
yes.
accomplish, and then you guys fill in the blanks.
yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I guess, let me look at the agenda. Date
Revisit
and time of next.
meeting, yep.
Yep. All right. Team, when are you guys available next? And we got to give ourselves time to look through these PEs.
Yeah,
What's available? I mean,
Our next, the next month, the Wednesday, the third Wednesday is our typical meeting date.
that's a good time. Let's go with
yeah.
that. Let's go with that. That's where we don't run into any conflicts.
Now,
And
if
it's the 17th.
17th.
Wednesday, June 17th, and at
Yeah.
this time, we'll still do it via
Virtually,
Zoom
yeah.
What
until
time?
otherwise directed. What time is good for everybody? Mel, isn't Wednesday your golfing day?
Yeah, but I can cancel. I tell you that. I mean, this is more important than golf.
Well, do
Especially
you
the way
play?
I play.
Do you play in the?
So I can adjust one Wednesday a month.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Would you guys, is 2 o'clock good for everybody?
2
Yeah,
o'clock is fine,
that
fine
works.
with me. Yeah.
All right, so Wednesday, June 17th at 2 o'clock.
right.
Yes.
And we will have done our homework.
Right.
Yes. 17.
I'll send those out to you this week.
Thank
Okay,
you.
very good, Robin.
Thank
That'll be
you.
great. All right. If nothing else, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, let's get ready for the real dance.